For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Dan Weber. Instant analysis of the Tuesday practice of Stanford week. All pads like normal for Tuesday practice. It was a physical practice, a little chippy, and something we kept hearing from Clay Helton. The defense was angry and they're mad and they're ready to get back out there.
He liked that, actually. There were, one kind of semi scuffle and then one a little bit more, but both, broken up fairly quickly. But the kind of things that said, our defense is really not happy. They're embarrassed. They're mad. He said they're right on that edge, which is probably a good thing. You don't want them to go over the edge, but they were on the edge today, and they scrimmaged a lot. They didn't full tackle, but they kind of tackled, and they finished up with like an extra 11 on 11 that we haven't seen before. Came down to Brian Kennedy Field and went like an extra 15 minutes. That normally practice would have ended a little after 6. It went to about 6:18. So they were on them.
Mm-hmm. Offensive day, we got to talk to Sam Darnold. It was interesting. He said he felt weird during the opener and made sure to note that this was his first start as a season opener. And he said there was some kind of nerves after having the whole season off and getting to start for the first time.
That's an interesting insight. And just the fact that he said, it was my first opening game, where last year he kind of got the build. He didn't carry the going into that opening game and with that sense of, I've got to make something happen, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. So I thought that was pretty good insight. I thought it was also interesting that he said when he sat down and really watched the film, he doesn't feel too bad. He said, he had 10 throws that were off the mark, he thought. The 2 interceptions were both tip balls, so that's not exactly, a problem. And you factor in the 4 drops, he wasn't off target all that very much. Both T. Martin and Clay said they're kind of happy if he takes it that way. That's what you like about Sam, that he would kind of take it that way. But the more he looked at it, the more he said, it wasn't too bad. It was okay.
If you paid attention during the game, you saw some high snaps from Nika Fala, and you actually got to talk to him today and get that sorted out, what was going on.
Yeah, he said he blames himself. He uses wide receiver's gloves. The good part of that, it gives you a real good feel and real good touch. The bad part is if they get wet, they're really almost a negative. Mm-hmm. And then he also said I wasn't very smart in the heat and the humidity and how he said, for example, the towel that he uses to dry off with got really soaked. And he said, I should have changed it. I didn't. That's my fault. He said, I didn't have one of those all last year. He said it was just something. You got to change your towel. You got to make sure you're out there every single time with a dry towel, and you got to change those gloves when they get wet. You can't keep trying to use them. He said, I did both. I shouldn't have done that. That was the explanation. He said, if you watch today, you didn't see that. And so, sounds good to me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Given how USC's run defense played on Saturday, there's a lot of commotion about whether their base should be nickel versus 3 down linemen, and Helton kind of went into that today.
Well, he said what Clancy does is he matches up against the wide receivers. Now, the problem was Western Michigan lined up with 3 wide receivers, but they weren't going to throw the ball to them. They didn't have 3 wide receivers who could catch it. They didn't have a quarterback that could throw it to them. So they lined up with 3 wide receivers, got USC in the nickel, and then just keep pounding and pounding and pounding the ball inside. And USC's got 2 down linemen, that's all. Clay said he didn't believe it. They were overmatched and outnumbered and all that kind of stuff. He said he thought that they weren't lining up properly. They were losing gap control, meaning the Western Michigan blocker got to the gap before the USC defender. I don't exactly completely believe that, but and I don't think you can against a team like Western Michigan. If you can't let them dictate your defense, you can't say. If they line up with 3 guys who aren't going to be in the play, you're going to line up with 5 defensive backs. I think that was kind of a mistake, and I think USC needed to force Western Michigan to throw the ball. Said, look, we'll play you man-to-man with our 4 defensive backs, and we're coming and we're not going to let you run the ball right at us. And they didn't do that. I don't think they'll make the same mistake this week. That's all I'm going to say.
Mm-hmm. I think for fans, if you were expecting a huge change in practice or something like tackling drills or extra receiver drills, we didn't really see that. It was kind of business as usual, and that's kind of Clay's MO. No dramatic changes based on what happens.
They did a little, they did some little things like they brought back the dummies on the inner tubes where they.
Yeah. But we normally see that, though.
We see them sometimes. We haven't seen them maybe in a week or two, but we're seeing them again now. I mean, we saw them regularly in preseason as they were getting more ready for the opener. We didn't see them. They're not maybe quite as effective as, say, those robots. Dartmouth invented robots where they have robots, self-propelled robots that they tackle. And I think it's a really good idea. At USC, they've basically got grad assistants or student assistants pulling ropes on the inner tubes, and then they got these dummies sitting up in the inner tube. But at least you're having to move and tackle and bring them to the ground, and they brought those back. But you're right. I mean, they kind of just said we're going to do what we do, but we're going to do it better, smarter, tougher, more physical. And they're not going to tell us, but they're not going to do some of the things they did against Western Michigan. They're just not. Yeah. And, so, we're not going to give them a scouting report here, but they're not going to do that.
Yep. All right, that's going to wrap it up for Tuesday practice of Stanford Week. For Dan Weber, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.